Om Sri Sai Ram. At the outset, I would like to offer my humble pranams at the lotus feet of our most beloved Bhagwan. Loving Sai Ram and greetings from Prashanti Nilayam. This is my 17th talk in the current series on Swami's life. And today, I am going to talk about festivals celebrated in Prashanti. No doubt earlier I made a passing reference to festivals in the context of the Venkatagiri Association. However, at that time I did not give many details about the actual festival celebration. Today I shall be speaking much more about the Prashanti tradition in festival celebration. But first I have to make a few preliminary remarks. Swami did not celebrate festivals simply because he liked to do it. There was a specific reason. But before I come to that, I would like to make a few general remarks about why humans celebrate festivals. They do this all over the world, but why? By the way, I'm talking about religious festivals. Now, in the beginning, festivals always had a religious connection. Secular festivals like Independence Day and so on came much later. And this connection between religion and festivals was true of communities all around the world. Naturally, India was no exception. People came together on festival days. They engaged in joyous activities and everyone was happy. It happened in small communities, villages, small towns and so on. It was by way of promoting happiness that Swami slowly established a distinctive Prashanti tradition in the celebration of festivals. Now in the Indian tradition, there are any number of festivals. Some of these are celebrated throughout the country, while others are celebrated only in local regions. However, wherever the festival was celebrated, north, south, east or west, there was always a religious underpinning to every festival. And since the Hindu pantheon has plenty of gods, there was good scope and reason to stud the calendar with plenty of festivals. At this point, let us not forget that 2000 or 3000 years ago, the world moved at a much slower pace than now. So people back then had plenty of time on their hands to engage in festivals. That's granted. Nevertheless, you might still ask, won't people get bored if festivals came too often? You have a point there. And ancient Hindus solved this problem by dedicating their festival to different gods. This way, every festival is different and unique, and there was thus no issue about repetitiveness. What I mean to say is that there were so many gods to choose from and worship that the nature of the festivals varied widely, and that solved the problem of repetition, boredom, etc. Now, all of the foregoing was merely an excuse to raise a basic question, and that question is the following. Now, how come, while most religions have only one God, the Hindus have so many? This is actually a non-trivial question and merits some discussion, especially in the light of discourses that Swami used to deliver during the festivals. During every festival, Swami used to deliver a discourse. And he stopped that only in the last year or 6 months. I shall come to the topic of Swami's discourses later on. But first let me address the question, why so many gods? And what do these gods represent? By way of answering that question, I should call your attention to the fact, and I must do this right in the beginning, that in the highest realm of Hindu philosophy, or Vedanta as it is called, there is only one God. This one and only standalone God is abstract, formless, nameless, omnipresent, etc. Even though the God is nameless, for convenience, this God is variously referred to as Brahman, Atman, Atma, and so on. The full and formal name, if I may say so, is Nirguna Nirakara Brahman. What does that mean? It means Brahman stroke God, who is without attributes and without form as well. Once again I repeat, no attributes, no form, and no name. That was the God in the ultimate and absolute sense in Vedanta. This God is infinitely infinite. I know it's confusing, but that's what God is. Very difficult to understand at the highest level. What it means is He is more infinite than you and I can ever imagine. Besides, of course, being omnipresent, eternal, etc., etc. I know it's all tough to comprehend, but for the moment, just take it to be that way. Okay, if that is what God is, then where did these numerous gods, in whose name so many festivals are celebrated, where did they come from? You know, Vedantic philosophy is very beautiful, and it thoughtfully leaves room for as many gods as you would like to have. It turns out that in Hindu philosophy, that God, while God is absolute, this God can also exist at many, shall I say, lower levels. I know you might find it confusing, but just think of water. We all think of water as a liquid. That is indeed correct. But don't you agree that water can also exist as vapor on the one hand and ice on the other? Are not vapor, liquid water and ice so very different? Water vapor, especially when it is thin, it cannot be seen. Moreover, it has no form and it can spread all over. In fact, there is water vapor in the atmosphere all around the earth, to various extents, of course, and we can't see it. From water vapor, turn now to water, which is one level below vapor. Liquid water is visible. Here's a glass I have here, and I'm sure you can see the water in here. The water is visible. It can flow, but it has no specific form. Its form, if any, is that of the container it fills, like here. If instead of this I put this water in a bowl, it will have the shape of the bowl, and so on. Coming down still lower, we have ice. And ice, you know, can assume distinct forms. I can have ice cubes. In fact, if you consider snowflakes, they have so many different forms. They are all very geometrical and very, very beautiful. Vedantic philosophy thus allows the individual to relate to God at all wavelengths as suits the individual. Now, this is a wonderful flexibility and is not available in other religions. In other words, according to Hindu philosophy, there is no such thing as one size fits all. The question now arises, why on earth did the Hindus alone allow for so many gods as compared to the Abrahamic religions, for example? I mean, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The answer is to be found in human psychology. Now, you know, Vedantic philosophers and scholars studied deeply the complexities of the mind, and they realized two things. The first is the mind of the ordinary person simply cannot grasp the idea of an abstract and infinite God. In fact, Tukaram, the great saint from Maharashtra, sings in one of his abhang, "O Krishna, how can this fool Tuka understand infinite God? And for Tuka's same, you have come with a form which I can appreciate, look at, and feel happy." So, this God with form was put there, recognizing the difficulty of the ordinary person to grasp the idea of an infinite and abstract God straight away. You take a child 5-year-old and you say there is God. Child asks you all sorts of questions. And if you try to tell the child God is infinite, cannot be seen and all that, child will just get confused and lose interest. On the other hand, if you associate a particular form with God, then the child will be able to understand. So there was a very practical reason for introducing God with form. And secondly, all of us live in this physical phenomenal world and we are all used to objects. All sorts of objects, animate and inanimate. Objects are finite, they have a form and also a name. Thus the ancients of India decided to allow for the concept of God with name, form and attributes. They felt that this way an ordinary person like you and me could easily love God and relate to this God in daily life. And there is no problem with dealing with abstractness, infinity, etc. More technically, Vedanta declared that while Brahman is Nirakara and Nirguna, that is to say without form and without attributes, this Brahman has also another aspect, and that aspect is called Saguna Sakara Brahman. That is to say, God with form and attributes. Not merely that, since humans tend to differ strongly from each other, the ancients allowed many gods and goddesses with different names and attributes. Thus it is we have Ganesha, Subramanya, Kali and so on. The gods have different names, different appearances, different attributes and whatnot, all of which made life much easier for ordinary and simple folk. Explaining all this, Swami once said, and I shall read out this quote of Swami. God is formless, indeed, but He has endless forms and He can adopt any one of them. In that case, in what form does God grant vision to the devotee? The answer is, He manifests in the form the devotee yearns for, the form that would grant the devotee maximum happiness. When the Raja of Venkatagiri saw Swami for the first time, knowing that the Raja of Venkatagiri worshipped Rama, Swami instantly transformed himself into Rama's form. So much so, the Raja just came and fell at Swami's feet, saying, "Oh, my Rama." The others did not see it, but Swami knew that Raja loved Rama and decided to please him. That is not all. Swami says, Indian gods typically have glorified human forms because humans tend to view God essentially as a superhuman being. In fact, I remember on one occasion, this is what Swami said. Brahman shines in the heart of everyone, and depending upon the individual's picture of the effulgent Brahman, the individual has the right to adopt that particular aspect. End of quote. In fact, I remember while talking about God with form, on one occasion, Swami said humorously that if a buffalo were to become very spiritual, it would possibly think of God as a super buffalo. By the way, the same idea is contained in a story by the well-known Indian novelist R.K. Narayan. In a short story titled The Tiger from Malgudi, Narayan describes a tiger that seeks a guru in order to turn spiritual. One day, the tiger meets its buddy, some other tiger, and describes its experiences. This is what the tiger says, and I shall read that quote. God must be an enormous tiger spanning the earth and sky, with a tail capable of encircling the globe, claws that could hook the clouds, and teeth that could grind mountains. End of quote. Now, on hearing the tiger describe this, the master was hearing this. The master began to laugh and told the tiger, God indeed may be that. He can assume any form that he likes. You may be quite right. Who knows? That's what the master says. Okay, now with that preamble, let me get back to the business of festivals in Prashanti. As I said earlier, Swami celebrated festivals because he knew that people loved festivals. So he said, why not celebrate festivals here in Prashanti that would encourage large crowds to come here to Prashanti, celebrate festivals in Swami's presence, and they would all be happy. Instead of mere darshan, they can also have the experience of festivals. In other words, one reason why Swami was keen about festival was that it gave him an extra opportunity to confer happiness on many people. Giving as happiness to as many as possible and as often as possible was always high on Swami's agenda. You must remember that. Next, and this is more important, as I said earlier, Swami always made it a point to deliver a discourse during every festival. And during the discourse, Swami not only explained what the festival was all about, but also took care to stress that although superficially each festival was dedicated to a different god, it may be Ganesha, Saraswati, Rama, Krishna, whatever it is, in truth, there was only one God who was being adored, though in different forms. In other words, Swami never missed an opportunity to stress that God with various forms was merely a stepping stone to the ultimate, where there is only one God and nothing else. That ultimate was Brahman or Atman or God in his absolute aspect, who is all-pervading, supremely powerful, and subtler than the subtlest. This, in spite of all this seemingly intangible God was ever ready to come to the help of any devotee at any time. Now, how does the devotee make sure that God would come to his help at any time he wants? The answer is by loving God always. In other words, God with specific forms made it easier for devotees to develop love for the Supreme One. To put it differently, God with form was the conduit for developing prema via bhakti. And that prema was for the ultimate, all-pervading, omnipresent, Supreme God. I shall speak on this topic later, especially since Swami has dwelt on it extensively. But for now, let me focus on one particular festival celebrated in a very unique manner here at Prashanti, namely Shivaratri. And before I do that, I have to explain what Shivaratri is all about. Now, the word Shivaratri is a combination of two words, Shiva and Ratri. Ratri means night. And as for the word Shiva, I am sure you know what that means. Maybe for the record, I should mention that Hindu Godhead consists of a trinity made up of Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer of the universe, and Shiva, who dissolves the universe when the time comes. With that explanation, it should be clear, Shivaratri is in adoration of Shiva, and that festival or austerity, which is a better word, is observed with an all-night vigil on a particular night. Question can be asked, which particular night, on which particular night is Shivaratri to be observed? Is there any special night? Indeed. This festival, or austerity rather, is to start at the end of the 13th day after a full moon and the beginning of the 14th day. I'll repeat it again. You have a full moon. The moon is seen big in the sky throughout the night, bright, shining. That is full moon. Now after that, the moon starts fading, waning, as they say. That is to say, it becomes smaller and smaller. Ultimately, it becomes a sort of a small, thin arc. At the end of the 13th day after the full moon and the beginning of the 14th day, the moon is barely visible. There is a reason why this particular conjunction is chosen. I'll come to that. By the way, the 13th day is called Trayodasi and the 14th day is called Chaturdasi. So, the observation or the observance rather of the all-night vigil in adoration of Lord Shiva commences at a particular time before new moon. And that particular time is the conjunction of the end of Trayodasi and the start of Chaturdasi. Now, why is the moon brought into the picture? That's a good question. And the reason is, in Vedantic philosophy, the mind is related to the moon. That's point number one. Next, and this may come as a surprise to most of you, according to philosophy, and Swami also used to say this, life must be used to conquer the mind and erase it. Now you might wonder, erase the mind? This is the most amazing gift given by God. What nonsense! Something is horribly wrong here. I agree that would be the natural reaction of most of us, and with good reason. We all know about the power of the mind. And furthermore, in the Gita, Bhagwan Lord Sri Krishna extols the mind by declaring that among the senses, I am the mind. Now, what more testimony can you give to the mind? And yet, we have here an austerity where we are talking of erasing the mind. Why? Swami has explained this any number of times, and it's my duty to draw your attention to that. Basically, what Swami says is, yes, the mind is indeed an incredible gift from God. The mind is also extremely useful. However, in the ultimate analysis, the mind is an obstacle if one wants to merge with God. Since ultimately, all of us must return to God whether we like it or not, we have to make sure that the mind does not come in the way. And how to do that? Dissolve the mind in the sense that it ceases to be the center of attention and attraction. Okay, the mind is to be dissolved. But what do we replace the mind with as the focus? And the answer is Atma or God. What I have just said so far would now enable us to connect three things. What are they? A, the mind, B, the festival of Sivaratri, and C, the fact that Sivaratri is observed just before a new moon or Amavasya. As we all know, on the night of the new moon or Amavasya, the moon is not visible in the sky. A day or two before that, the moon is a mere thin circular silver arc. Just as this silver arc eventually disappears on the night of the new moon, so also one must try to mitigate the domination of the mind through immersion in contemplation of Shiva. That is what dissolving the mind actually means. I hope it all makes sense. By the way, Swami used to give rings to people. He used to do it regularly. And there are two kinds of rings that he gave. He gave a number of types, but two types were very common. One was a ring with a green stone, and another was a diamond ring. He gave this ring with a green stone to people who had to control their temper and so on. And he gave a ring with a diamond to people for a different reason. Somebody asked him, Swami, what does this diamond means? Swami said, die mind. Ask the mind to die and get lost. So, dissolving the mind is something that was given a lot of importance by Vedanta, and Swami used to stress that as many times as possible whenever the occasion arose. Okay, assuming all this makes sense, let me proceed. Now you can ask one more question, and a good one. You may say, listen, every 30 days or so there is a Mahasya or a new moon. And along with this, there is every time a conjunction of Trayodasi and Chaturdasi. Which one of these is selected for observing the Sivaratri austerity? That's a good question, and thereby hangs a story also. It appears that once Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu had a dispute among them as to who was superior. Notice that Shiva was not a part of this dispute. Okay, there was this argument, a heated one I might add, between Brahma and Vishnu as to who was greater. Just then, a long and brilliant shaft of light appeared. It was very bright, brighter than 1,000 suns. The beam was incredibly long, and neither its beginning nor its end could be seen. And embedded in the beam right in the center was a lingam. While Brahma and Vishnu were looking at this and wondering what it was all about and gazing at the lingam, an ethereal voice was heard which said, "Stop quarreling, both of you. Instead, search for the end of the beam. He who finds the end first is the superior one." Brahma and Vishnu then began to search for the end of the beam. One went up and the other went down. They tried and tried for thousands of years, became tired and gave up. They could not find the end. They returned to the starting point, sadder and wiser, admitted their failure, swallowed their pride, and bowed to the lingam, which was the representative of Shiva. In other words, both Brahma and Vishnu surrendered to Shiva, and that happened during one of the conjunctions of Trayodasi with Chaturdasi. The anniversary of that particular day is observed as Shivaratri. But the more devout ones observe every conjunction of Trayodasi and Chaturdasi before the new moon as a Shivaratri. And this particular one associated with the Brahma Vishnu story, which is the most important of all Shivaratris, is referred to as Mahasivaratri. You might have heard some people use the word Mahasivaratri. This is the reason. I'm sure many of you must have had the experience of being in Prashanti Nilayam during one of the Mahasivaratri or some Mahasivaratri or other. In the very old days, Shivaratri at Prashanti had a flavor of its own, and I want to bring to you some of that flavor by leaning on the writings of two important devotees of Swami, namely Howard Murphy of Australia and our own Kasturi. Let me start with Howard Murphy. This man is from Australia. He served in World War II, and in 1955 he went to England on vacation along with his wife. He was retired. He had a lot of time, and so he toured England extensively. And on his way, he decided to pass through India. He spent many months in India too. He visited many ashrams. He visited the Theosophical Society, where he spent 6 months trying to understand theosophy. And finally, Howard Murphy ended up in Prashanti and immediately became captivated by Swami. I shall now read out extracts from Murphy's writing about the Shivaratri of 1966, which fell on February the 18th. I am now going to quote from Murphy's famous book, Man of Miracles. This is what he says, quote, "Here is my diary entry on what took place that morning, namely February 18, 1966. On the stage is a large silver statue of Sai Baba of Shirdi in his characteristic sitting posture. Mr. Kasturi takes up a small wooden urn about a foot in height, and filled with vibhuti. This he holds above the head of the statue and lets the ash pour over the figure until the urn is empty. He shakes it well, that is, Kasturi shakes it well, to make sure that the last grains of vibhuti have fallen out, and then continues to hold it above the statue with the open top downwards. Now Kasturi is doing all this just to draw the attention of the audience, devotees, to the fact, here is a pot, it has been emptied, it's now empty. And Swami is going to take over. What happens when Swami takes over? That is what I am going to describe now by quoting from Howard Murfitt. Now Sai Baba thrusts his arm as far as the elbow into the vessel, and makes a churning motion with his arm, as women did while making butter in the old days. Immediately the ash begins to flow again from the vessel. This was empty before, and now ash pours from the vessel and continues to do so in copious stream until he takes his arm out. And what happens when he takes his arm out? Murfitt. Then the flow of ash stops. Next he puts his other arm in and twirls that around. The ash stream pours out over the statue again, and this process goes on, Baba using alternate arms, ash pouring from the empty vessel while his hand is in it, and stopping immediately he takes it. Finally, Shirdi Sai is buried in a great mound of ash, much more than the vessel could possibly have held. Now the urn is placed on the floor. The miraculous ceremonial ash bath is over. There is a joyous, elevated atmosphere all round. Mr. Kasturi's face is more radiant than ever. Baba's movement and manner are the acme of unself-conscious grace. It's all wonderful. So that is Murfitt's description of the famous Vibhuti Abhishekam. I have seen films of it, and they are really stunning. Before I proceed further, a word or two about the Abhishekam process. This is a procedure in which an idol is bathed or showered with substances, and the substances commonly used are milk, water, and then milk, honey, etc. Swami performed Vibhuti Abhishekam and later distributed this Vibhuti. Murfitt says there was a huge mound. It would be made into small packets, and Swami used to personally distribute this on the following day. There are wonderful photographs of Swami moving around, carrying a plastic basket in one hand, packed with these packets, and then he would be giving these one by one to the devotees. He would do this distribution personally. By the way, Swami has also explained the significance of Vibhuti, and maybe I could take a minute to call attention to that. Now, when a material object is completely burnt, what do you get? You get ash. Try to burn ash and you will find it cannot be burnt. Ash is thus a terminal phase, and it is representative of purity. For humans, the end of the final road must be purity and purity alone. And this purity can be achieved only by going through tremendous fire. In other words, the process of self-purification is tough, and it's like going through fire. So much for the significance of Vibhuti. Let me now turn to the evening of February 18th, 1966. And once again, I would like to turn to Howard Murfitt to see what he says about it. This is what Howard Murfitt says about the evening program. He says, "The big climax of the day was yet to come, and many people talked to me about it. They told me every year one or more Sivalingams have materialized in Baba's body at this sacred period. He ejects this lingam through his mouth for all to observe. They are always hard, being made of crystal clear or colored stone, and sometimes of metals like gold or silver. Are you sure he does not pop them into his mouth just before he goes on stage and then eject them again at the right moment? I asked. Typical Westerner's doubt. My hearers looked at me with amusement and pity. One of them said, "He sings and talks for a long time before the lingam comes out, and it's always much too big to hold in the mouth while speaking. Last year, it was so large that he had to use his fingers to pull it through his lips, and he stretched the lips so wide that the sides of his mouth bled." Another added, "There were 9 in 1 year, each about an inch and a half in height. Imagine holding all those 9 in your mouth while you talk nearly for an hour." At 6 o'clock, Sai Baba, accompanied by a small group of disciples, came on to the Shanti Vedika, a small rotunda. The building stands some distance in front of the mandir and is rather like the open bandstands in parks of western cities. It is circular with an elevated floor, a low fence, and narrow pillars supporting the roof. By the way, this circular bandstand-like thing, which used to be called Shanti Vedika, you know where it was located? Imagine Sai Kulwanthal as it is now today. First focus on the entrance near the Yajur Mandir from where Swami would come. You know there's a passage there, and Swami would come in the old days walking and later in the car. And whom does he pass? He first passes the ladies. And then, after some distance, he comes to the ladies, end of the ladies segment. The Shanti Vedika was somewhere in the middle of that passage, halfway in the ladies section. Today it is gone. There are photos. That's all we have. Here is what Murphet says about what Swami did in the Shanti Vedika on February 18, 1966. So Swami comes and Murphet says, soon after that the speeches began. It was about 8:30 in the evening and powerful electric lights illuminating the group on the platform. And when Sai Baba rose to his feet. In other words, there were speeches first, as always, and finally it was Swami's turn to speak. First he sang a sacred song in his sweet celestial voice that touches the heart. What Murphet is saying is that Swami began with a padyam. He then began his discourse, speaking as always on such public occasions in the Telugu tongue. Baba's eloquence had been flowing in a steady stream for some half an hour when suddenly his voice broke. He tried again, but only a husky squeak came. Bhajan leaders among the devotees, knowing what was happening, immediately gave voice to a well-known bhajan or holy song, and then the great crowd joined in. Baba sat down and drank from a flask of water. Several times he tried to sing, but it was not possible. Now he began to show signs of real pain. He twisted and turned, placed his hand on his chest, buried his head in his hand, plucked at the hair. Then he sipped some more water and tried to smile reassuringly at the crowd. I kept my eyes fixed on Baba's mouth. My whole attention was glued to that point so that I would not miss the exit of the lingam. In fact, it would come from... I'll read that again. My whole attention was glued to that point so that I would not miss the exit of the lingam, if in fact it came from there. After about 20 minutes or so of watching Baba's mouth, while he writhed and smiled and made attempts to sing, I was rewarded. I saw a flash of green light shoot from his mouth, and with it an object which he caught in his hand cupped below. Immediately he held the object high between his thumb and the forefinger so that all could see it. A breath of profound joy passed through the crowd. It was a beautiful green lingam and certainly much bigger than any ordinary man could bring up through his throat. Sai Baba placed it on the top of a large torch so that the light shone through it, glowing, so that Sai Baba placed this lingam on the top of a large torch so that the light shone through its glowing emerald-like translucency. Then leaving it there, he retired from the scene. So that was the big lingam made of something like emerald-like crystal, which Swami produced on the evening of February 18, 1966. Murphet did not realize that such a thing would happen. He had been told about it but did not believe it. And finally he saw it. But you know, Murphet also began to think about what this lingam means. You and I would stop with being amazed by the spectacle of Swami's Lingodbhavam. Murphet wanted to go beyond and learn something about the significance of the lingam. And it is worth knowing what Murphet says, because he really shows serious scholarship and thirst for knowledge. I'll read out what Murphet says. The Sivalingam belongs to the class of natural Hindu symbols, which are usually mathematical in form. Such symbols are called natural because they not only represent a reality, but to some extent are the actual vehicles of the power within that reality. The lingam is an ellipsoid. It symbolizes Shiva Shakti, that is the primary polarity principle of positive and negative forces. On this principle of opposites, the whole universe is founded. From the one Brahman emerges Shiva Shakti, the father and mother of all that is. You must note in this connection that Shiva is not only an aspect of the triune of Godhead, the destructive and the regeneration aspect. He is also the highest God, the father of all the gods, the cosmic logos. The Shiva Shakti principle is demonstrated in all pairs of opposites, and nothing can exist in this phenomenal world without its opposite or contrast. In fact, the concept of opposites is basic to our very thinking at this level of consciousness. We cannot know light without darkness and so on. The lingam has a profound and significant connotation. The word means a symbol or an emblem, which in itself suggests that it is a basic primary symbol. In fact, representing in concrete form the fundamental principle and power of creation, it is considered the highest object of worship on the physical plane, and it has a true mathematical relationship to the reality it symbolizes. It can bring the worshippers in rapport with that reality. That is end of quote. I must say, I am very impressed with Mr. Murphet's research and writings. The point to remember is, lingam is the highest representative of the created or manifested universe, whereas abstract God, which is pure consciousness, or rather where abstract God symbolizes pure consciousness, when that abstract God projects downwards to create the universe, there are two aspects. There is consciousness, Shiva aspect, but there is also the aspect of divine energy or Shakti, the consort of Shiva Parvati. So these two act like two poles and opposites, and that is what Murphet refers to. Now what we have to do in life is to see through these opposites, bring them closer and closer and closer. As Swami says, the positive must combine with the negative. So supposing you take the ellipsoid and it has got two foci and you bring them together, ultimately you get a circle. So this difference disappears, the opposites disappear, and you get oneness. That is the Shiva aspect. And the aim of life is to go from the Shiva Shakti aspect to the Shiva aspect, and that has to be done by dissolving the mind, and that is done by all-night vigil at the junction of Trayodasi and Chaturdasi, and that is what Shivaratri is all about. Now, thus far I spoke about Shivaratri of 1966 based on the writings of Howard Murphy. Let me now turn briefly to our own Kasturi, who not only held the pot for Swami in many of Vibhuti Abhishekam, but also documented many Shivaratris through his writings. I would now like to read out what Kasturi says about the Shivaratri of 1969. This is 3 years after what Howard Murphy saw. Kasturi picks up from the point where Swami is delivering a discourse. Kasturi says, Baba spoke for about 40 minutes on the mind and its manifold tactics to confuse and confound. Suddenly, the gushing stream of superb eloquence and supreme guidance was interrupted by gasps and gutterings, premonition of the emergence of the lingam, which Baba endeavored to put down a little while. Then he signaled for bhajan to start and himself sat on the chair behind the table. No one heard the bhajan, though they were mechanically uttering the words in the tune allotted to them. For the crucial moment was fast approaching, and no one in the gathering wanted to miss it. All senses were now concentrating their efficiency on the eye so as not to miss the divine event. Baba was under the floodlights, squirming, turning, twisting, sitting forward, leaning backward, sipping water, and showing signs of exhaustion. All parts of the amazing drama that he was now allowing these thousands to witness, so that they may stand witness in their own lives to the glory of being contemporaneous with the avatar. 50,000 eyes were focused on that serene mouth. For 15 long, laborious minutes, they looked. It has emerged in one leap. A blue shaft of light, was it? No, it was the blue lingam, oval-shaped, oval-sized gem, celebrated in the Shastras as specially sacred on account of the color and size. It has fallen from his mouth into the cup palm of Baba. He held the wonder in his hand, high in the light to be seen better by the vast gathering, now in the height of bliss. That is the end of the quote and also the end of reflections from the glimpses from the past, shall I say. Now the Lingodbhavam event, which was the highlight of Shivaratri, became such a star attraction that Shivaratri began to attract huge crowds. Crowds so huge that it became difficult for the ashram authorities to manage. You must remember, we are talking about 60s. Back then, the infrastructure for handling such crowds simply did not exist. So one fine day, Swami discontinued Vibhuti Abhishekam and Lingodbhavam. And it remained discontinued for many, many years until he revived it in the 90s. I was privileged to witness all of this second innings Lingodbhavam events, if you may call it that. In fact, in the year 2004, Radio Sai actually telecast the Lingodbhavam over a spiritual channel. The live telecast called for enormous planning and preparation, which we were able to do by Swami's grace entirely. And when I look back, I would say it is remarkable we managed to do such a telecast. Clearly that was willed by Swami himself. The telecast was seen all over the country, even in the Middle East, and the impact was electrifying. How do we know? We were getting phone calls even while the telecast was going, and afterwards we were flooded with emails. A few comments now on the Shivaratri of later years. The crowds were huge, and I mean really huge. Next, in all cases of Lingodbhavam, the lingam was of pure gold. It was bright and shiny. I never saw crystal lingam or anything. It was always golden lingam, Swarna lingam. And finally, the struggle to bring out the lingam, Swami used to bring out, it became far more than what Kasturi describes. No wonder Swami's age was now past 70. Sometimes Swami struggled for nearly an hour or more. And during this period, he would drink jugs of water, not tumblers of water, jugs. I mean, abnormally huge quantities. I was wondering why. Later he said in private, you know what? The gold first forms in the molten form in the stomach. That means at a high temperature, gold doesn't melt until you go to 400 degrees or no. So, imagine a stomach at 400 degrees centigrade. You and I can't imagine that. But anyway, that explains why Swami used to drink so much water. Liquid gold would then consolidate into the lingam shape and finally emerge out of the mouth. As the years rolled by, the struggle to bring the lingam out became more and more. So much so, I recall one year, Swami used to ask somebody to speak before he delivered his discourse. In the early days, 2 or 3 people would speak, but in later years, it was always one person who spoke. I have done it a few times myself, but on this occasion, the speaker, if I remember correctly, was Narsimurti. And in the course of his talk, he did something which none of us dare do, but he did it anyway. And there was a reason why he did it. He said, Swami, all of us beg of you, please do not strain yourself to bring out the lingam. All we want is you, and that is enough. We can't bear to see you struggle to bring out the lingam. We have seen enough of it, Swami. So please stop. That is what he prayed for. But the lingam came nevertheless. Swami said later, these things are divinely ordained and they have to happen. Nobody can stop it. But mercifully, as Swami started becoming more and more frail, the Lingodbhavan stopped altogether. I must not forget to mention that until the last few years, Swami invariably made a midnight appearance in the Bhajan hall or in Sai Kulwant, wherever Shivratri was celebrated, to encourage the devoted who kept the all-night vigil. By midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, the crowds would have thinned considerably, and those left would be the loyal and tough ones, including many elderly ladies and committed foreigners, and of course Swami's students. Seeing his students, Swami would beam with joy like a proud mother would. Notice this midnight appearance was one aspect of his constant attempt to give joy, happiness and encouragement. I cannot end this description of Shivratri at Parthi without some reference to the morning after. I don't know whether Howard Murphy did it or Kasturi did it, but I have seen something unique and I have to tell you about it. Basically, Swami would come early. That is I'm talking of the early 90s, early days of the revival of Lingodbhavan. He would come around 6:30 or so. He would take his seat on the porch, listen to bhajans for a while, and then signal for it to be stopped. He would then deliver a discourse, 2 discourses, one in the beginning and one at the end. And after that, there would be Arati. And after Arati, a wonderful prasadam distribution. I've seen it many times, but on every occasion I was amazed by this prasadam distribution. It was a silent distribute to the way Swami orchestrated and perfected this routine over the years. The cooking of prasadam would be done around midnight in the early hours of the morning. And around 4 o'clock, the trucks would bring the prasadam, huge vessels, tons of them. They would all be brought by a tractor trailer, and a huge student crew along with sevadals would be in total charge. They would bring these things even while the bhajan was going on. It was simply fantastic. And after the arati, when the prasadam distribution was done, the amount served would be substantial. There would be a sweet item, shakar pongal, and puliyara. 2 items on 2 leaves, dry leaves, stitched leaves, and I would call it breakfast. It would first be distributed to the bhajan singers, lead singers, namely the students, who are always at the vanguard of singing, both boys and girls. After that, to tens of thousands and without any chaos or commotion. It would go on very smoothly, absolutely no rush, crowding, nothing of that sort. I have seen it so many times, always perfect. And what would Swami do? He would move around them, devotees, children, all of them, and talk to them. He would see them eating prasadam and still ask, did you get prasadam? That's an old tradition in India. And just to make the guest happy. And even though you are eating prasadam, when Swami asks you, it's quite nice. I remember one year, one of the elders was sitting next to me. He was slightly old and his hands were not steady and some of the prasadam fell on his pant. Swami looked at him. First he asked him, did you get prasadam? He said, yes, Swami, I am eating it now. Then Swami looked at him and said, I gave prasadam only to you, not to your trousers. He laughed and went away. Now 1 year, during the morning after function, Swami did something totally unexpected. The prasadam distribution was tapering off, but Swami continued to remain in the Sai Kulwant hall. He did not disappear. Instead, he was sitting on the porch and suddenly he gave a signal. And you know what happened after that? A red Hyundai car was driven into the hall. We were all surprised. Suddenly a red car coming. Was it coming for Swami? No, it was not coming for Swami. An announcement was made. Swami asked for an announcement to be made. And Mr. So-and-so was asked to come near Swami. That person came. Suddenly, it took everyone by surprise, including that person. And Swami garlanded that person and gave that person a car key. This was totally unusual. We didn't know what was going on. Swami told something to the person. The person walked with the car key to the place where there are garages. These are adjacent to East Prashanti, the gents side. There is a gate there through which the devotees enter. Security check and all is there. And there are garages. Near that garage were parked 4 cars. So this man gave the key to one of the drivers. 4 drivers were there, got into the car, which was driven up to Swami and stopped. So it came back and stopped. This man got out. And the person was blessed by Swami. He offered Pada Namaskar. Took Pada Namaskar, that is. And so on it went. That morning, 4 persons who had done much service to Swami over the years, each received his divine grace and blessings in the form of a red Hyundai car. What a surprise it was. I think it is time to stop, but before I do so, I would like to do something. I would, if you permit me, like to draw your attention to this particular DVD. This DVD is a Sai Blossom product. And I am drawing your attention to it because it captures many memorable scenes of the Sivaratri of the past. It is, in my view, a treasure, and I strongly urge you to get a copy. I'm not trying to do sales promotion, but this is memories of Swami of yesteryears. Where are you going to get this? Now, if you visit Prashanti Nilayam, and if you want this DVD, all you have to do is to visit the Sai Blossom stall, which is just opposite the Radio Sai building. If you don't know how to go there, just walk towards the bakery and you will see Radio Sai building. On the left, you can't miss it. And on the right, just in front of it is this building with big boards and all that. And there you can pick up as many copies as you want. The price is quite affordable, I assure you. If you are in the USA, Canada or UK, all you have to do is to go to Amazon.com. I might add that very soon Sai Blossom products would be available via its own e-commerce site, which would cater to people all over the world except in USA, Canada and UK, where we already have an arrangement. Today, memories of Shivratri are still fresh in our mind. But look at, say, 30 years from now, 40 years from now. People of that generation would simply not believe that things like Lingodbhavam happened. I might say that already we are unable to believe that such a thing as Vibhuti Abhishekam took place because Swami never revived the Vibhuti Abhishekam. So you see, DVDs like this are treasures that would help you to convince those who come after you that Swami was not a concocted legend. He really walked amongst us. At this juncture, I cannot help recalling my good friend Bob Bazani, who runs the Trustin Book Center. He has told me so many times, you know, today we take Swami for granted. But look 50 years from now, when people talk to their grandchildren, the grandchildren would ask their grandfather, do you mean to say you actually saw Sai Baba? Are you sure you talked to him? Did he give you vibhuti? It all sounds so unbelievable. You know something, that day is already at our doorstep. We are now admitting students to our schools and colleges who have not seen Swami. And it is not even 2 years after he dropped his physical form. Thus, these DVDs are not purchases. They are invaluable and dynamic pictures, as valuable as the framed photo in your puja room. In fact, I would say your puja room must have a TV screen so that after worship, regular puja, you can actually see Swami giving darshan. Now, I would like to also bring to your attention this second DVD. This one has a record of Shivratri of 2010, the year of Swami's 85th birthday. Now, this is the last time, Swami gave what I would call normal darshan during Shivratri. In the year 2000, Shivratri came in February as usual, but Swami was not at all well. So he could hardly stay on the stage. It was more a formality. We were all very sad, but that was the way the cookie crumbled. So, these DVDs are sort of treasures that would allow us to remain in touch with memories which are here. Those memories can be brought on the screen and we can relive those days. I think I will stop here, lest you think I have become a marketing man. I am not, and my job is different. But let me share an honest thought with you. I have been closely associated with the production of many documentaries, and while doing the final cut, I have seen many of these scenes again and again. And on those occasions, all of us engaged in the editing would simply forget the job of editing and become lost in the beauty of Swami's form. Seeing the loving God move and showering love is an unforgettable experience. And now we have the chance to relive that experience through moving pictures. That's all I am trying to say. With that, I take your leave. And as always, I would like to end by offering this talk to our most beloved Bhagwan. God bless you all and Jai Sai Ram. Thank you for listening and watching.